Ladies and gentlemen, today I'll be reviewing The Adventures of Brisco County Jr., a television series that aired for 27 episodes from August 1993 to May 1994 years. The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. was created by Jeffery, Boam, and Carlton, Cuse. It stars Bruce Campbell, Julius Carry, and Christian Clemsenson. And the show follows the title character Brisco, a Harvard lawyer turned bounty hunter, as he is hired by a group of industrialists to track down outlaw John Bly and his gang, who just so happen to also be the ones guilty of his father's murder. So the show aired on Fox, and Fox executives came to Jeffery, Boam, and Carlton Cuse because of their success on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Carlton Cuse wrote the screenplay, and Jeffery Boam was his friend and advisor for it. They also worked together for Lethal Weapon 2 and 3 scripts. So the show follows sort of Indiana Jones style. Fox wanted it to replicate classic serials, which Indiana Jones also tries to replicate classic serials. And Jeffery Boam and Carlton Cuse discussed that how those classic 1930s serials had their westerns, but they also had their sci-fi. So The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. tries to mesh them together. Although one of the genres technically is sci-fi, there's not a lot of episodes dedicated to that sci-fi genre, and we will discuss more on my thoughts of the sci-fi subplots and everything when we get to that section of my review. But first I want to say that it does a really good job at blending genres. Now, sci-fi isn't the only genre it blends. There's plenty of episodes individually that pay homage and replicate some piece of classic film or television. For example, there's an episode which is basically a retelling of Psycho in its own humorous way with direct references to the film Psycho. There's a bunch of different films as well that go over different genres, and like I said, pay nods to various television shows. Back to the Future, there's a little nod to that during a sequence where characters time travel. There's an episode with a courtroom drama. There's also murder mystery, supernatural horror. It just clashes so many different genres, and like I said, it never feels like they don't piece together. There's plenty of pieces of film and television that try to mix genres, and it fails miserably, and the tones never match. But Brisco County did a really good job through every episode, through every genre, of never feeling like the pieces of the puzzle weren't supposed to go together. Most people probably know Bruce Campbell from the Evil Dead series, and he's a really solid leading guy for this television show. He's very charismatic, he's very funny, he just captures what this character is supposed to be about so well. He's extremely likable from the moment we see him, and not just that, but there's also great supporting side characters. Julius Carry and Christian Clemsenson play Brisco County's most well-liked, well-known, well-used sidekicks in Lord Bowler by Julius Carry and Socrates Pool by Christian Clemsenson, two hilariously funny characters that pair really well. Julius Carry plays Lord Bowler, who at first actually started off as Brisco County's rival, but then throughout the show they realized that they were a better pair, and they had really good chemistry with each other, and that was definitely one of the best moves the show made. They're really hilarious together, really funny. There's a lot of great moments with them, even when they're rivals for the first few episodes. But once they start to partner up and team up, there's some really heartfelt, touching episodes and some really funny, hilarious moments throughout everything. As for Christian Clemsenson as Socrates Pool, he's a really funny character as well. He's used a little bit more as like a sidekick, but then he kind of moves to like an in-between man for them. Usually his own subplot relates into it. He's a really funny character, fish out of water in the Western, so when he teams with Lord Bowler or Brisco County Jr., usually there's some hilarity in the fact that he's not really fitting in, especially with the whole gunslinging, horse riding thing, and it leads to some really funny moments. There's also some lesser used funny sidekicks. One character's Pete and Don't Touch His Piece. Really funny, and there's a running gag where he keeps getting killed, but he keeps on surviving through being killed. It's pretty funny. There's another character who's basically an Elvis impersonator, but because this takes place in 1893, Elvis didn't exist. So it's kind of meta, and He's one of the more likable characters. He's actually really funny, even though he's basically just being Elvis. And in the last episode, all these characters that we've been seeing kind of all end up in this one huge storyline together, and their interactions are absolutely hilarious. Pete, who's been a villain most of the show, he teams up with them all, and he has some really funny interactions with everyone, especially the Elvis impersonator. Throughout the show, there's also a lot of solid villains. There's one pirate, I forget his name, but he was actually a pretty cool change of pace, and I really like that episode. And the main villain throughout is John Bly, played by Billy Drago, who just looks like a terrifying person. And he's a really, really good villain. He just looks the part, he acts the part. But we'll get into more of that a little later. Going into the show, I thought it would have a humor style close to Airplane, The Naked Gun, where it was very self-aware of the genre and poking fun at itself. And there are some moments like that, but overall it's a pretty serious show with just like funny characters that are... The humor is coming from the characters with each other, not necessarily what's happening within the world. And I was really surprised by that. And it's not a bad thing. It's still really funny and really entertaining. And I was surprised at how it wasn't so... I talked about Elvis being meta. I thought the whole show was going to kind of be like that, meta style. But it wasn't, and I was surprised. And it was still really funny and entertaining. Now, before I say anything else, I want to get to my one negative for the show. And that is... John Bly, Billy Drago. I said Billy Drago plays John Bly perfectly. He looks the part, he plays him so viciously, and he is a really good villain. But the show's 27 episodes long, and John Bly isn't the villain throughout the whole series, but probably for about 80% he is. And therefore, Brisco County Jr. and him encounter each other quite often. And there's a lot of times, of course, because it's a running television show, where John Bly escapes. And that just keeps happening and happening and happening. And it kind of gets tiresome because it feels like they've done everything that they could possibly do, and they're having this really cool, awesome fight that you feel like is going to conclude it, and then John Bly gets away by something stupid happening, and then you're kind of like, well, here we go again. Now, there's also a sci-fi piece of this show. It's the Orb. It's this magical thing that has some sort of mystical power, and there's like these rods and whatever. And throughout the entire show, it feels like even the writers didn't know what the heck it was, or where it came from, or what it can all do. And in watching the bonus features on the series discs, there's a part where all the writers are talking about the show, and well, it's true. None of them did know what its thinking was or what it did. One of the writers even admitted that they basically just wrote it however it needed to be in that episode and found itself along the way. The lead writer of the show said that he didn't even know where it was from, even though there's a specific episode that says it was from the future. You can tell they didn't exactly know what it was either, because first there's 3 and then there's 2, and then it seems like no one really misses the third one, and they don't need the third one, and one of them had scarring similar to meteorites on it, like it was from space. Honestly, they didn't know what they were doing with it, and it's very blatant, and it's very obvious, and it's very irritating, because it probably would have took one day to figure out what it was. All they needed to do was decisively figure out that's what it is and just let it be that thing. And instead they keep jumping around, and you can tell that it's switching. And luckily this isn't a main piece in too many of the episodes. The major arc of the series, that it is a part of it, but it's only in a few episodes, and usually it limits itself to that episode that it's in. It's not too distracting on the whole series, but it is a very irritating piece throughout the show that I did find. And that could just be a nitpicky thing, but to me it bugged me so bad because they're trying to do this overall arc and they don't even know what they're going for in the end. Now, I don't want to spoil the show because most people probably haven't watched the show, but I'm going to try and say this as vague as possible. There basically is a twist with John Bly that I found completely unnecessary and completely irrelevant, and it made his whole plan so stupid. Billy Drago still plays him perfectly, and it doesn't take away from John Bly in that episode or any others. But it's just kind of like this dark cloud looming over him that you remembered it, and you're like, yeah, that's kind of stupid. The whole arc with that wrap-up also feels really rushed. But, yeah. That being said, the season finale isn't the wrap-up of the arc. That story arc actually wraps up with like 4 or 5 episodes left. And in those 4 or 5 episodes, you can kind of see where the show was going to start taking it after that. And that's why I posed the question earlier, should shows be canceled after 1 season? Because where the show was going, or where it appears at least it was going to be fantastic. I mentioned the great chemistry and humor between all the characters, side characters that came together in that final episode, like the Elvis impersonator and Pete with his piece. And if the show would have continued, I assume they all would have formed some type of team. I think it was Jeffrey Boam who was talking about the fact that if there was going to be a season 2, it would have had Brisco becoming the sheriff of some town, and then some various adventures and people in the town kind of taking over and populating the show. And that would have been really awesome. I would have really liked to see them all kind of settle down in this town and work together. The president kind of becomes their guy. It just kind of gets a little cuckoo. So it settling down in that terms, I think would have really benefited the show. And I was talking about how they nod to other movies and TV shows earlier, and there's also a lot of tributes to other shows. There's actually, in the season finale, and I guess it's also the series finale, Terry Bradshaw actually guest stars in the 2-part episode. And he plays this, like, army general, and there's a part where he's actually drawing up a play in the sand with X's and O's, and they're running through the wood wheels like it was tires at like a training camp or something. Very, very funny. And yeah, and of course there's also if you ever watched the show The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, Indiana Jones kind of goes through time and he's meeting these famous people and interacting in these historical moments. Brisco County Jr. does a similar thing, but with inventions. One of the sub-themes of the show is the future and how it's always there, and we're turning the corner into the new millennium. The show takes place at the end of the 19th century. So we're turning to the new century. The future is right there. It's within us at the moment. We just don't know it yet. So Brisco is very aware of this, and we come across so many different inventions: sunglasses, showers, rockets, scuba suits, just so many different things that we see, like projectors, fingerprints, just a whole bunch, motorcycles. That's one of the sub themes to the show. So there's a lot of things like that, and of course it's, you know how shows are. So they're like, what is this? It's some sort of motored cycle. Like, you know what I'm talking about. With all that being said, though, there are some really touching episodes. Like I said, I don't want to spoil anything, and if I were to tell you, that would give away the episodes. But there's some really heartfelt, touching episodes that I thought was a cool change of pace, because it's comedic and everything, and then you get to this really like heartfelt moment, and you're like, wow, okay, so this show is more serious than you might have imagined going in and everything. But great characters. I haven't mentioned Comet, Brisco County Jr.'s horse, who's really intelligent, and there's some funny moments to that. But the show, where it was going, it looked very promising. As the show continued on, there were some gags that they stopped doing so much in the middle of the season, but then they brought back in the finale. So I figured that season 2 was where they were going to find themselves and everything. But it's unfortunate that it got canceled. But then again, Bruce Campbell and Jeffery Boam both said that they were relieved when it ended, because it was such a pain to make. It was like nonstop making it. They were getting stressed out. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise, but either way, I suppose it's time to grade Brisco County Jr., The Adventures of. So I'm going to give The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. a B. For what it is, the show is really, really good, really, really fun. I definitely recommend watching it if you haven't seen it. And if you haven't watched it in a while, maybe go back and check it out, because it is pretty funny. My only complaints really are that some of the arcs feel a little rushed and like they really don't know what they're doing. But I think if it would have gone to season 2, you would have really seen it come into its own and been something really special. Definitely check out Brisco County if you haven't seen it. It's a pretty solid show. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time in my parents' basement, your parents' basement, our parents' basement.